To replace the cylinder in a Raptor, start by deploying the Raptor so that the spike is resting just above the ground. Then go ahead and either remove power from the Raptor pump or place the Raptor into maintenance mode. To do this, press and hold the pairing maintenance button on the Raptor pump until you hear a series of beeps. The blue LED on the pump will illuminate. To relieve pressure from the Raptor's hydraulic system, open the bypass valves on the pump manifold by first removing the acorn nuts from the manifold using a 1/2-inch wrench. Then, use a flat blade screwdriver to open both of the exposed valves at least one full turn in the counterclockwise direction. Please use caution when doing this, and note that this will relieve all pressure from the system, and if not properly supported, the Raptor will be able to move freely. Next, using two T30 Torx wrenches, remove the 2 screws going through the cylinder pin. The pin and support bushings can then be removed. The pin may remain attached to one of the support bushings. Note that on an 8-foot Raptor assembly, the upper spike bumper is part of this assembly. This can remain in place while replacing the cylinder or hoses. When performing a cylinder or hose change on a 10-foot Raptor assembly, there will be a separate cylinder rod end spacer not included on an 8-foot Raptor that you will reuse when replacing the cylinder. It simply goes over the end of the cylinder rod, and the cylinder pin will run through this piece and the cylinder rod to hold it in position. Next, use two T30 Torx wrenches to remove the 2 screws going through the bottom of the cylinder base. The pin and support bushings can then be removed. At this point, if the hoses are being replaced, pull the hoses through and loosen and remove the hoses from the pump using a 9/16-inch wrench and discard the old hoses. Take the new replacement hoses and pull them through where they will be routed in the boat and attach one end of each hose to the hydraulic pump manifold. Thread each hose fitting onto the manifold connections by hand 5 to 7 times, being careful not to cross-thread the connections. Once each connection is hand tight, use a 9/16-inch wrench to tighten the connections. It may be helpful at this point to mark each hose on the other end where they will attach to the cylinder, indicating which is connected to the up and down circuits on the manifold. Now, thread the hoses through the bottom notch of the outer extrusion near the top pivot of the lower mounting bracket. Be sure to leave roughly 15 inches of additional hose length for where the up hose will connect to the cylinder once inside the Raptor mechanism. You'll also want to make sure that you leave enough hose length between the area where the hoses exit the Raptor and where they enter the boat. This is to ensure that the Raptor has enough hose length to complete its up and down movements when finished. So it may be good practice not to zip tie or restrain any hoses until you have completed the replacement and can verify you've left enough room for this. Next, connect the up hose to the end of the cylinder where the rod exits the body of the cylinder. Thread the hose connection onto the cylinder fitting by hand 5 to 7 turns until the fitting is hand tight. Then, connect the down hose to the opposite end of the cylinder. Thread the hose connection onto the cylinder fitting by hand 5 to 7 turns until the fitting is hand tight. Then, use a 9/16-inch wrench to tighten the connections and use a torque wrench to tighten all 4 of the hose fittings to 120 inch-pounds. Now, we're ready to reattach the cylinder into the Raptor mechanism. Orient the cylinder so the bottom of the cylinder, the end closest to the mounting bracket, has the hydraulic fitting facing away from the outer extrusion where the hoses were routed into. Place one of the support bushings assembled to the pin and align the bottom of the cylinder. Then slide the pin and bushing through the bottom cylinder pivot location of the outer extrusion. Note that the support bushings are keyed and must be aligned properly to fully seat into position. Next, place the other support bushing onto the other side of the same pin, making sure that the alignment key is in the proper position, and fasten the 2 1/4-20 flange Torx screws using 2 T30 Torx wrenches. These screws come with pre-applied thread locker on them, which allows these to be reused if you so choose. If your service kit came with new screws, go ahead and use the new screws. Next, Raise the rod end of the cylinder and the upper spike bumper into position and place one of the support bushings assembled to the pin through the pivot location of the inner extrusion and through the rod end of the cylinder. If you're doing this on a 10-foot Raptor assembly, the upper spike bumper will not be in this location, but will include a cylinder rod end spacer. Place the cylinder rod end spacer on the end of the cylinder rod, and the pin will run through this and the cylinder rod. Then slide the pin and bushing through the pivot location of the inner extrusion and through the hole in the rod end of the cylinder. Remember that the support bushings are keyed and must be aligned properly to fully seat into position. Next, place the other support bushing onto the other side of the same pin, making sure that the alignment key is in the proper position. Then, fasten the two 1/4-20 flanged Torx screws using two T30 Torx wrenches. Use a torque wrench to tighten all of these screws to 35 inch-pounds. Once you've completed the replacement of the cylinder and/or hoses, we need to close the bypass valves. Using a flat blade screwdriver, turn the bypass valves in the clockwise direction to close them. Do not over-tighten these, but make sure that they're snug. Using a 1/2-inch wrench, replace the acorn nuts atop the bypass valves until they're tight. These help to ensure the bypass valves remain locked in the closed position. Then, go ahead and restore power to the Raptor pump. Next, press and hold the up button on the Raptor pump until the Raptor is in the fully retracted position. If the Raptor deploys, then check the position of your up and down hoses coming from the pump manifold and correct this before you proceed. Continue to add fluid and operate the Raptor up and down until all of the air is purged from the hydraulic lines and the hydraulic fluid stabilizes at the max fill line in the reservoir. Minn Kota recommends taking the boat out to water that is at least 10 feet deep and use the buttons on the hydraulic pump to run the Raptor through its full range of motion up and down at least 10 times. That will remove any residual air from the hydraulic lines that might still be present. For more information and instructional videos, be sure to visit our website at minnkotamotors.com and find us on YouTube under Minn Kota Motors.